Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, I know that people who've had a loss are really worried about their grieving kids.
Absolutely, Mama. We're going to talk today about nurturing hope in grieving kids with some people that know a lot about this.
Absolutely. And I really needed this kind of information after I lost my son Scott many years ago, but you always worry about your kids. So, Heidi, why don't you introduce our guest?
Okay, Mom, but before we do that, I just want to give a shout out for your book. Here it is.
All right.
Open to Love, The Secrets of Senior Dating. And as many of you know, my father died in 2020, and I just assumed my mother was going to be a widow and single for the rest of her life.
I thought so too, and then I decided to write a book for widows and wrote a chapter on online dating, and I met Dr. Frank Powers, second love of my life.
Yep, surprise, surprise, my mother has a fiancé who I happen to like. He's a great guy, so please go get this book. It's at Amazon, Open to Love.
And give us a shout out on Amazon after if you enjoy it. Thank you. Okay, Heidi.
Okay, Mom. So yes, we're going to be talking about grieving kids, how to help them. I know, like you said, this was a big thing on your mind. You had two teenagers, and I was 20 at the time Scott died, and you were grieving. Mm-hmm. And yet, when you're grieving, you're also trying to help your kids.
Oh, yeah. You really worry about your kids a lot.
Absolutely. So I'm going to introduce all of these guests today. I'm going to start right here with Dr. Liza Barros-Lane, who actually had children when her husband died. So Liza she has two children. One is a stepson and one is her son, so she has two children. She is an assistant professor of social work at the University of Houston downtown, an adjunct professor at Tulane University. She is the founder and executive director of the Young Widowhood Project. In 2020, her husband Brent died in a tragic drowning accident. Liza was just 36 years old and had a young son, as we've said, and a stepson. And they were what, 3 and 11? 3 and 11. 3 and 11. Okay, and Liza shares her insights through her social media platform, which is called @The Widowed Researcher. So welcome, Liza.
Thank you.
Next to Liza, Korie Leigh. Dr. Korie Leigh. So Korie has written a book about this topic. She is a grief counselor, child life specialist, and a child development expert. She is an associate professor and program director for the Thanatology department at Marian University. And Korie had to terminate her pregnancy at 16 weeks for medical reasons. She is the author of these books, What Does Grief Look Like? And It Won't Ever Be the Same, A Teen's Guide to Grieving. So she works with kids and teens.
I would have liked that, A Teen Guide to Grieving, yeah.
Absolutely. So she's going to shed some light on that with us. And then we have Kate Mollison. Kate is a certified grief coach, founder and CEO of On Tuesdays We Wear Black. She is also a widow and had two young children when her husband died. Her husband also died in 2020, just like Liza's. Her husband, Craig, died unexpectedly of medical negligence. And as I said, she was only 32 at the time and had two young children. Kate is the host of the National Grief Awareness Professional Development Conference, and she recently did a TED Talk about her experience, which will be airing soon, and we can see it soon.
Next couple weeks.
And you are also in the book Faces of Grief.
Yes, so that just released. It's available on Amazon, a co-authored grief collective presented by Grief Hab. We're so excited to have 30 different stories about grief and loss.
That's amazing. And we've done a show on that if you want to Google her name, and you will see the show that we just did on it. And next to you, Kate, is Julie Ryan. Julie is a psychic medium and a medical intuitive. She's written numerous books and a lot of books for kids. There's a lot of books. I don't know, we've written like 6, 7 books, right? Yeah. So these are just some of them. Angelic Attendants, What Really Happens as We Transition from This Life into the Next. And a book called Angel Messages for Kids, so that's about kids. And Angel Messages for Your Life's Journey. Julie is a businesswoman, author, podcaster, and an inventor. So welcome to the show, Julie, and welcome everybody.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show. You know, worrying about your kids is so paramount, isn't it? Really a big issue. I wonder, what do you think the number one issue was for you when you lost your child? Anybody can go
Not
with
lost
it.
your child, lost their spouses, and yeah.
I don't know that I can pick one, right? Because there's so much. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have to like establish that safety and that housing and that security before you can even move on to the emotional. And you're not just balancing your own emotions, but you're watching your children and you're watching them go through it over and over and over again, because developmentally they re-grief as they hit different milestones. So my daughter was 19 months old when Craig died. She was a baby. And to have her have questions like, where's daddy? Where's daddy? And have to answer that
Big
to a 2-year-old.
question, where's daddy? And we'll get to that
Yeah.
in a minute, because I want to ask you what your thought is on that, Julie, on those questions like, where's daddy? But what did you find?
You know, just telling him his dad was dead. He was 3, and because he's bilingual in Spanish and English, my family's bilingual, and he didn't speak as much because he was still a lot of receptive language, but not a lot of expressive. And so I was telling him, Daddy is dead, his body no longer works, he's never coming back. And saying it like that, like I'm just going to just put the dagger in all the way, I'm not going to give any, like, Daddy might come back, nothing like that. And just wondering, did he understand? So I did the death news twice to my son, and so I think that, like, it's one of the worst experiences, having to tell your child this, and then an hour later, while his diaper was being changed, he told my best friend, Daddy's dead. Daddy's never coming back, you know, and then realizing he did understand what I had said, you know, and so that piece of it, and then a lot of, like, the nightmares and the watching him be traumatized. Like, I hardly left the house for a year because he was terrified. Every time I left, that I would disappear and not come back home.
Right.
You know, and like I told y'all before, we never saw my husband's body. So my son, it was just like Daddy left and he never came back, and that was it.
So they don't understand reversibility.
Yeah.
And I see that in children that have lost a parent. And like I said, the 9/11 widows I work with, they're afraid the other parent is going to die. I'm wondering, Korie, what you work a lot with kids and teens around this. What comes up for you?
Yeah, I'll definitely echo both of these things. Almost all the parents that I work with really struggle with having to have that conversation over and over again, developmentally, particularly for kids that are in the pre-operational stage, right? So around 3 to 6 years old, where there's just a very different way of understanding time perception, develop like object permanence, you know, a sense of identity, of self. And so having these conversations over and over is incredibly challenging for the families.
And it goes throughout the lifespan, because as they get older, their questions change.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, it might be jarring for you because you're in a different space, and they might say, "What happened to Dad? Tell me more about his death." And you're like, "Wait a minute. Where is this coming from?" As they get older.
Yeah, I remember when we were working with the 9/11 family, one of the women said it was really disturbing because it had been 3 years, and the kid's in a restaurant, and suddenly he says, "My daddy's dead,"
Yeah.
because he was a baby at that time, and suddenly this woman is confronted with being in a restaurant where a kid, you know, yells out.
Julie, I'm wondering what's coming up with you with all of this, because you've done some books with kids.
Yeah, 4. It's called the Angel Messages series, and they are picture books for little children, and it benefits the parents too, you know, when they're reading the books. And it talks about how university-based research shows that every child can communicate with spirit. Usually they shut it down at about the age of 7 or 8, when they have an adult or a teacher say, "Oh honey, that's just your imagination. Grandpa's really not in the room. Grandpa really is in the room," and the child can communicate with them. Or
Julie,
one
I
of
love
their-
this. I've got to say something, and then I want you to continue with this. When my son's grandfather died, my husband's father, my son was very close to me. He was only 3 years old. And he said, "Mommy, I love going in my room and playing because Grandpa watches me."
Right.
And I was like, "Wait, that's really weird. What?"
Yeah. Yeah.
But, you know, like you said, I was trying not to shut it down, but we do get kids do get messages of, no, that they're not here. They're dead. They're not
And
with you.
sometimes their friends will tell them too. They'll say something about Johnny, their friend, and they'll say, "What are you talking about? There's nobody else in the room except us." Well, this other kid's already shut their abilities down. And children don't know that that's not normal until somebody teaches them that it's not normal. So my children's picture books, and they're beautifully illustrated, Angel Messages for Kids, for Cats, for Dogs, and for Truth, talks about how we're all spirits in a body, and we choose our family. And even if you see your deceased loved one, like, you know, we'll say, you may see a picture of your grandfather, to your point with your son. Even if grown-ups can't see him, you can see him and you can communicate with them. All you have to do is think of them, say something to them, and they're going to answer you. And the stories I have thousands of stories from families who they're either talking with the deceased loved one's spirit in heaven, communicating telepathically, or like what you just shared, Heidi. But the stories, I'll say to the mom who's lost her dad, and the grandfather, comes to the child's room, and I'll say, yeah, he's talking about this airplane that you have hanging from the sky and how they take it down and they play with it at night. And she said, oh my God, I can't tell you how many times that plane's fallen down from the sky in my son's room. Or when babies cry in the middle of the night and they act like they're really mad, what's happening is they're mad because the spirit that's in the room with them leaves and they want to continue to play. And so it's been really helpful for the children.
I'm fascinated by this as you're speaking. I'm thinking of a recent situation that happened with my daughter. So she's 5.5, and developmentally we've started to cross that threshold where she's starting to reprocess things. And that's been very challenging. But I'll catch her playing in her room and having a tea party, and she's talking. And after Craig passed away, he had a keychain collection, and I gave her one of his keychains, and she'll hold it and rub it, and she'll be like, oh, I gotta put more magic back into it. And she'll rub it and be like, there, Mom, it's all charged, you take it with you for work. So she's got the keychain on her table, and she's playing, and I hear her talking, and then I go back in, and I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm just having a tea party with Daddy.
And she really is.
And she tells me all the time that she talks to him, and I'm so moved.
Thousands of stories about that. Really.
I love that you're not trying to shut it down too, because I'm imagining that some parents are like, no.
I ask her, I'm like, well, what are you and Daddy talking about? Oh, did Daddy play with you? Or oh, do you hear Daddy? Are you talking? And of course, sometimes she's like, yeah, I hear him. Or no, I know he's there. And it's a beautiful thing to watch her and embrace that, because I know she's still grieving, and I'm not a skeptic, but for those who out there who may be, whether it's real or not, it gives her comfort, and it gives her purpose, and it gives her grief something productive to do. She's alchemizing the experience in a way that she can rationalize. I would be a monster to shut that down.
May I say something else about this? I find too that it gives children the ability to think critically, because what are we teaching them? They're seeing and communicating with a spirit, and we're saying, oh no, that's just your imagination, that's not real. So it makes them not trust themselves and trust their own intuition when we do that. So when we encourage it, even if we can't see it or perceive it, we just say exactly what you said. Well, tell me about it. What are you guys talking about? What's Daddy doing? Daddy tell you what he's been doing lately? Things like that. And it encourages them, and it gives them such an amazing, separate area of knowledge that they can tap into in any situation as they grow. And we found it to be really helpful.
However, I will have to say, when I was a child, I had an experience where I saved somebody's life. I was very young. I was at 7, and I did not want to talk about it. And I would not tell anybody what I knew. That something told me all these steps. It was a long steps. A lot of things happened. And I had to go get people. I had to do all sorts of things that were unusual, and I didn't want to share it. And the local authorities wanted to know how I knew what to do. And I'm like, because it was some kind of an internal sacred thing for me. So don't expect your kids, you can quiz them maybe too much, because it gets close to that sacred something going on that you have intuitively.
I think of it like if they were still alive, I would want her to have a relationship with her father, and I would never interfere with that. Well, absent of me. They are entitled to their own relationship. And just because he's gone doesn't mean that has to not be an opportunity for her.
And
she
they may be having experiences that
forming that relationship
that they really don't want to talk about.
So. When Brent first died, in the first, I would say 6 months, my son would be asleep, laughing, being like, "Oh, Daddy, you're so funny," and just having conversations when he was asleep. And of course, it was beautiful and also gut wrenching to hear that. But
Yeah.
He saw him. Remember, a couple weeks in, we were driving on a very high overpass, and Roswell said, he pointed out the clouds, and he's like, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy!" He starts screaming, "Daddy's right up there," you know. And so I think that, like, for me, I've never discouraged him. I've always wanted to feel connected, to see what he sees, to experience what he experiences. And then just the I guess the burden for me was to not get all emotional about it, because I did. I mean, that was always like, oh, I'm gonna start crying, you know, and just be like, just try to contain it so he can have his experience and not take that from him.
I saw Craig in full body apparition, and it was right after my daughter had had a nightmare, and I was able to, he was there visiting her, and I just happened to catch him walking down the hall, and that stopped me in my tracks. It was probably about a year after he passed, and everyone tries to tell me, like, oh, you were deep in the emotions. I was like, no, cortisol levels had leveled out. Like, it was such a beautiful moment that I could see it so clearly, and to feel him there. And like that keychain that I gave my daughter, it's on her backpack, and she wears it to school every day, and every now and then we'll get in the car and she'll be like, oh, Daddy's here. And I have to, like you, not get emotional, because you don't want to take their grief moment, but you also don't want to impose your own emotions on them and just hold space for
Or
it.
you don't want to get too excited about they should have more, you know.
Or we're in the bus stop line. How do you shut that down before it's time to get out of the car? And okay, that's nice, gotta go. So how do you, it's a lot.
And then they're, as you say, they're the naysayers, and you know.
Well, then I have a teenager too, so that's a whole other different experience with grief too.
Yeah.
So, Korie, what are your thoughts on this? I know you work with teens and kids.
Yeah, I do. And both of the books that I wrote address the unique experiences of younger children and teenagers. And one of the reasons I wrote the book for teenagers is there were no books out there that had teen stories, teen voices, but also had a bit of a clinical perspective, written in language that was palatable and easy to digest, and kind of pick up the book at any place and read it. And same thing for the first book that I wrote as well. I was so frustrated with the lack of developmentally appropriate books that had a language for parents to be able to use. And one of the things that parents would say all the time is, what do I ask? How do I ask this? How do I have the conversation?
Yeah, I like that question.
I mean, how do I start?
How
do I start? What do I start with? What do I say? What do I not say? And so the first book that I wrote actually has questions embedded throughout the pages.
How do people start?
Hey, let's go. Yeah, how do people start? How did you guys start? How do you start?
We'll talk about the death story?
Just in general, just keeping, I don't know if it's the death story or just in general talking about the loss.
I think for me, because I was there when Craig died, but the kids weren't. And they watched him leave via ambulance, and then there was like a 2-week time period before Craig passed away. There was a lot of questions around that permanence and that closure, and that it was a lot. So how do you start? You just start. And it's uncomfortable and it hurts. But it hurts you more initially, I have to say, than I think it hurts them. Because they're just trying to understand. And the kindest thing you can do is just start.
I was a total coward. I had my husband's relative tell them. Oh no, he came. Yeah, he came and told you.
Yeah.
I had my husband's. It was in the middle of the night, and I got in touch with him, and he went up to the house because I wanted to hear that their brother and son had died in person.
I actually didn't enjoy that he told me. I would have rather had you tell me.
Yeah.
But I understand as a bereaved parent, it was hard for her. But I was like, I don't really know this man, and he's telling me that my brother's dead.
Well, I really had him come because he was my husband's favorite uncle, and I wanted him to tell my husband that his son had died.
That makes sense. But
would have been nice. We were 2,000 miles away from each other.
Yeah.
So big decision on what you do. I couldn't imagine telling everybody. It was.
No. I love your
That's
word
awful.
of coward, because that is exactly how I describe myself, because my husband was missing for 2 days. And so I thought, my son doesn't know, like he wouldn't understand what missing means. You know, I don't know even where daddy is. Is he underwater? Is he like, what has happened? So people would ask me, how's Roswell doing? And I'm like, well, I'm just waiting to know what happened. But truthfully, I didn't want to face him. I was so terrified to go in there and be the person that rips his life apart. Like, I know that I wasn't the person, but I was the one that was going to give the news. news. And so when Brent's body was finally found on Sunday, I really didn't tell Roswell until Monday. You know, and because I was terrified. And then finally I was like, it's me. No one is coming to save me. It's me. I have to be the one to go in there and say this to him. And so I had my twin sister to come into the room with me, and she actually took a video. I have an identical twin, and she was videoing everything at the time because she was like, you're not going to remember any of this, and we just want to like keep this. And so there's a video of me, and I've never been able to watch it, of me telling Roswell that Brent had died, you know, and I kept hoping that I would die of a heart attack before having to tell him. I was like, please take
It's
this cup
awful,
from me.
because it makes it real.
Yes, yes, and you're
When
telling
you tell
yes,
them, it makes it real.
It's real. It makes it real, and it makes it real to them. And you're about to tear their life apart. Like it was the worst thing. And so, but it was like that. I knew that when I went to say it, I could leave no room for ambiguity. I could not say that, you know, let him think that Daddy's coming back, that there's any hope. It's like there is no hope. The knife goes all the way in, and that's, as a parent, to be the one to do that. So that's the most
your
loving
child.
thing to do to your child.
It's
is
almost
to take
like
their
a part
hope
of their
away.
innocence a little bit is
It's gone.
Absolutely forced my 11-year-old to grow up way faster than they had to be. Because when Craig died and the timing of it, I had just gotten home at like 1 in the afternoon, and at 2 the bus came. So we were not even settled in at home in the aftermath. And to have him walk in the house with 20 people and everyone's crying, and to be like, what's going on? And have to pull him in the other room while there's kerfuffle and lay that on him was gut-wrenching. But as you're talking, I'm thinking, I have no conscious recollection of the first time I told my daughter. I have no conscious, she was 19 months. I have no conscious recollection of the exact moment in time. I could not tell you how old she was when I told her for the first time.
Yeah.
And I know she knows because we talk about it. We've
Right.
had several conversations. But I have no idea when I first told her or how I first told her.
I'm wondering what's coming up for Julie, because you're
How
working
would
with
you?
kids, and
what's
I mean,
your
you're
thought?
writing these books for kids, etc.
Well, what I suggest is talk to your loved one's spirit in your dreams. Before you go to sleep at night, say, hey, Dad, come visit me in my dreams. Let's go fishing, like with your husband. Let's go fishing. Because when we sleep at night, our vibration goes back to the factory preset level of spirit. Goes back to a high vibration. Our brains rest, and about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, we're on the spirit level. It's really easy for spirit to communicate with us because we're on the right channel. And then the other thing that I tell them that's really important to remember is there's a difference between a dream and a visit. Visits feel like they're in high def. The colors are more vibrant. The senses are more tone, they're more acute, and you remember, whereas a dream is kind of muddly and all of that, and they get it, and it's so healing for the teenagers and anybody of any age. Little children don't need that because they're already communicating with them, but once they shut that ability off, that come visit me in my dreams, and just request it before you go to sleep. And if they don't come in the first night, keep asking. You know, we don't know what their schedule is, but they're going to come. Eventually, the spirit is. And it's so comforting. And university-based research shows that's one of the most efficient ways to heal grief, is to communicate with the
So I'm wondering, I know
deceased
that
loved one.
there's people watching right now that have kids that are grieving, and I'm wondering what advice you all would give them.
Put the power back in their hands.
Okay?
Ask them what they need. That has been one of the most successful things with my teenager, is really giving him the tools and the verbiage and the support to decide how he grieves and how he feels best supported, to have those conversations and say, hey, how are you today? Do you want to talk about it? And he has gotten so emotionally intelligent in being able to say, Mom, today's a really hard grief day. I'm going to take some space.
Wow, good
I'm
for
so
him.
proud of him for that at 15. And
That's
for my
amazing.
daughter, same thing. You know, like, I'm not really feeling well. I'm like, oh, are you sick? No, Daddy was in my dreams last night. Like, oh, do you need some extra snugs? Yeah, that would be nice. Like, you want to go visit Daddy today? Yeah, that would be nice. Give the power back to them. Just because they're little, 5, 10, 20, doesn't matter. Don't do it to them.
I like that.
Yeah, and I would say also too for the parents that are at the beginning of this journey, what words do I say? Like, you can be as concrete as you would like to be, you know, avoiding euphemisms, but you will have the conversation so many times that even if you feel like you're not saying the right thing, there will always be time that you can revisit it and come back to it, and you're going to learn together how to grieve as a family. And it's a journey.
I like that. Not to worry if it's passed you by, 'cause it's going to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, 4 years after. So this in July was the first time I told my son that my husband had been missing. He didn't know that. He walked into the room and I was preparing a PowerPoint presentation and I had Brent's missing poster, and on this computer screen. And he was like, "What is that?" You know, and then he got distracted quickly and then went away. And I was like, like called Sarah, and I was like, "What do I do?" He asked me. She's like, "Tell him the truth." So it's this whole thing about giving back their power. Just say it. And I was like, "Really? How?" She's like, "Just say Daddy was missing. Just give him the story." So on the 4th year anniversary, I told him, and it's like you're saying, you have multiple opportunities to unfold the story because they're too young at a certain age. If they're,
How old
you know,
was he? Was he 7?
He was 3 when he died.
And he was 7 when he unfolded.
At 7. He
that
was
makes
7.
sense. So
Yeah.
he was in a different developmental stage
Yeah.
and ready to hear about the missing piece.
Yes, he could hear that. So he knew he had drowned, but he didn't know, you know, that he had been missing for 2 days and that kind of thing. And so I think that it'll keep coming. And I think what Kate, what you said, and giving them power back, like one way that has been helpful for me is to tell my son, like, he has a lot of foot pain. When he's in deep grief, he has so much foot pain. It's crazy. And I tell him, "Are you feeling sad for Daddy? Because I've noticed that when your foot hurts, you're feeling sad for Daddy." He's like, "Yes." So it's like helping him connect his bodily, you know, sensations,
grief
right, to his,
manifestation.
right.
So,
So
Julie,
yeah,
what piece of advice have you got?
Talk to your deceased loved ones,
Okay.
either in a dream or yourself. Teach these little guys and even the teenagers, say something. Your loved one's going to answer you. It's going to feel like a thought in your head. It's going to come in instantly.
Now tell us where we can find you online.
AskJulieRyan.com is where everything, that's kind of the hub for everything. My podcast and YouTube channels are all under Ask Julie Ryan.
And you've got a free giveaway book.
Got a free giveaway. Anybody that would like a copy of Angelic Attendants, What Happens as We Transition. So just go to AskJulieRyan.com. There's a button there. Send me a free book and we will.
And how about you, Kate?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, Kate Mollison. You can find me there, or on my website, On Tuesdays We Wear Black. That's where I have my free blog, resource guide, glossary of grief terms, and my podcast, where season 2 will be coming in February.
All right. And Korie?
It's KorieLeighPhD.com. I'm also on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. My Instagram handle is Dr. Korie Leigh, and you can find my books anywhere books are sold: Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble, you name it.
Awesome. And how about Liza?
At The Widowed Researcher for Instagram, Facebook, and my website is the Young Widowhood Project. But really, you can get anything you need from The Widowed Researcher and contact me that way.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys all for being on the show today. It's been amazing. And we've really enjoyed it. And I want to give my last piece of advice, which is take care of yourself first, because your kids are going to watch you.
Absolutely. We want our parents to be healthy. The first time my mom ever went jogging, I was so happy because I was like, she's taking care of herself. I've lost my brother. I don't want to lose my mother.
So Heidi and I want to thank everybody for joining us on this show today. And we also want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.